Well, the decision to get with me. Have you ever heard of the big lie? This misconception that was first coined by Adolf Hitler in his 1925 book. The year 1925 book, the main count, and it was used to describe the propaganda technique that was effectively reported to have to be the Nazi Party and to try to making people or preventing people from that when they get paid. It's based on the idea that while small lies are easily distilled, repeated, and rejected, big market lies can often seem more credible. If presently in the proper way, the reason is that the people have trouble believing anyone is, even a conscious power lie, doesn't one is not obvious untrue. And therefore, if that lie is repeated often enough, and with sufficient conviction, the people who hear it will actually begin to question their own power position and start to believe what they explicitly know to be untrue. It's a fascinating evil concept, and it's worth listening to. Hitler himself explained it. In the big lie, there's always a certain force of credibility, because the broad masses of a nation are always more easily corrupted in the deeper strata of their emotional nature than consciously or voluntarily, and thus in the cognitive infinity of the mind, they more rarely fall victim to the big lie than the small lies, which they themselves often tell small lies in the matter, but would be ashamed to escape to large-scale falsehoods. It would never come into their heads to fabricate causal untruths, and they would not believe that others could have the impudence to distort the truth so continuously, even though the facts that prove this to be so may be brought clearly to their mind, and they will still doubt and waver and will continue to think that there may be some other explanation. For the grocery infinite lie always leaves cases of the legal religion behind the fact which is known to all the liars in this world and to all who conspire together in the art of lying, in which people know only too well how to use falsehood for the basest purposes. This technique of deception was conceived by Hitler was defined and put into practice on a massive scale by Jesus. So that the Nazi military propaganda repeatedly wrote, if you tell a big lie, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating, people will eventually come to believe it and enlighten the nation, continue any such time as they speak until the people from the political or common knowledge and or military consequences of the lie. It does become predominantly important for the state to use all of its powers because pursuit to the truth is the moral enemy of the lie, and must by attention the truth is the greatest enemy of truth. Thus, according to the main artists of the big lie, this method of propaganda works best with the following three elements are engaged. Number one is the political lie having the same concept as the representation of the lie to wear a mask on it increase the pressure of the truth to a climate of fear. The most effective application of this technique, of course, took place in the 1930s against the Jewish people. The rebels making use of the mass media available at time, including radio, newspapers, and high-speed equipment, and distribution of magazines and newspapers, told the lie that these were subhuman, and that they were evil incarnate, and that they were responsible for all that economic hardship being experienced by the German people. And obviously this was absurd, but the Nazi propaganda machine wasn't entirely with the mass media went into full gear repeating the lie in every possible way. and they convinced the German people that Jews were poisoning society and were responsible for every evil imaginable, and that the only way humanity could be saved was to rid itself of Jewish influence. And we all know what the final solution to this problem entailed: the extermination of the Jews in the Holocaust. It wasn't until the Allies crushed the Nazi army in 1945 and pictures of the concentration camps were shown to the German public that the big lie was finally exposed. But while the forces of Big Trust in World War II, the big lie kept making disappear with the Nazis. It was televised many times in cross-country with deadly results, and unfortunately it is being used today in an effective manner by you guesses, our friends the new atheists. How so? In the last chapter we looked at the constantly saying that the religion is responsible for more death, bloodshed, and war than any other single factor in history. The charges shouted from the hilltops by atheists everywhere, and then trumped by their sympathizers in the entertainment industry, the media, and the academic world. It's even familiar to school children who are taught very early about the Crusades and the Inquisition and many other so-called crimes against humanity perpetrated in the name of God. And we'll have something to say about this infamous event shortly, but the first point to make clear is this: it's a lie. It's a big lie. A big blanket false lie. Religion is not the cause of most of the wars that have taken place. It is not the cause of most of the murders that have taken place. It is not the cause of most of the bloodshed that has taken place. And to even suggest such a ridiculous thing is to display in ignorance of history, tantamount to imbecility. The number one cause of war and bloodshed on this planet was, and always will be economic gain. And one country or city or town wishes to take control of another world and has to do so through force, violence, conflict, and people die in ancient times. The economic benefit might have been gold or silver or precious jewels or land or trees or livestock or slaves. In modern times, the economic benefit usually takes form of oil or technology or machinery or resources for manufacturing, no matter the specific object to be gained. The underlying motive is always the same: money. The next to economics and often connected with it, the most common cause of war and bloodshed in the world has been territorial gain. One country or city or town comes to the conclusion that it desperately needs more land, either for economic reasons such as agriculture or oil, or because it wants more living food, such as the Nazi invasion of its neighboring countries, of the creation of buffer zones between enemies, such as in the Middle East of the Europeans. Did I ever repeat it? Yeah, I ever repeat it. So we're in this chapter. It says called the challenge of David. So we said at the beginning of this book that the most prominent character trait of modern atheists is ignorance, followed closely by ignorance. Indeed, these two qualities seem to be racing against each other, with ignorance always managing to win in a photo finish. If, however, we ask this question, which atheist character traits deserve the longest discussion, there would be no contact at all. For while any chapter in this book might serve as the basis for a book of its own, the subject we're going to deal with now deserves a wholesale shuffle book. In fact, there are so many examples of this particular atheist characteristic that it has been a Herculean task to cut this chapter down to another regard. Of course, the plate I'm referring to is the electrical um, electrical dowry. The fact that there are only so many ignorant aunts that can be made by atheist celebrities, and there are so many ignorant lies that can be told by atheist authors, and there are only so many ruthless murders that can be committed by atheist dictators. But there is simply no end to the number of idiotic statements that can come out of an atheist's mouth. I really don't need to be vicious here. The same attorney the low-key persecuted charge, Manson was one of the most successful child lawyers of all time. Did I read this too? But I didn't really. Just cowering. Yeah, what does that mean? Hold on, y'all. Here's the bookmark. And just try to put on clean pages. Review. And so there's the holiness of the Jesus. In the gospel of Christ implies himself of life and says of the mission, I came so that you may have life and have it more abundantly. In the book of Proverbs, we see that kindness is also true. All who hate me, God loves us. This simple but really different is found throughout scripture, and we'll discuss it more a little later in this book when we talk about the real motivation at the heart of the atheist movement. For now, though, it's enough to say that there is a profound and fundamental connection between atheism and death. And at first, this may seem illogical. After all, one would think that since atheists do not believe in an afterlife, they would do all they could to prolong this life. And one would think that because they do not believe in a here and after, they would do all they could to defend, protect, and treasure life and into here and now. Alas, this is not the case. Indeed, the opposite is true. At the end of this last chapter, we concluded with the cognate remark that atheists had a love affair with death. The truth is even stranger and more frightening for atheists today. Thus, after death, their whole outlook is pervaded by death, their actions stripped of death. Once again, we need to give some historic context in order to understand the motivated regard death-centered agenda of the modern-day atheist. We already talked about the important atheist and anti-Christian philosophers of the 18th and 19th centuries, men like Voltaire, Russia, Marx, Gray, I don't know the words. The critical point to grasp about these thinkers is that their writings, while revolutionary, did not permeate into the general culture until after they were dead, and the vast majority of people who lived at the time. These men were as founding remained steadfastly Christian. In the years following Necessity's death in 1900, however, the atheist philosophy of such thinkers began to find its way into the literature of the nations of the world. People such as Julian Huxley in England, John Dewey in America, Ernest Haeckel in Germany, and Jean-Paul Sartre in France are typical of the philosophers who reviewed with the author beyond good and evil, and that the Christian creed was the deepest enemy of humanity. Mozart's disciple John Dewey, for example, is the recognized scholar of American education. His 50 books have penetrated every taste possible of our modern school system. His point is, atheism today is not a minority Christian as some would think. On the contrary, in most developing countries, atheistic thinking has already achieved related dominance. Granted, not everyone in this free society uses the word atheist to describe their philosophy, but that is merely a linguistic point. The popular atheism of both Europe and North America is very much a practical form of unbelief. It is not so much the electrical denial of God, although that is becoming more and more fashionable, but rather the moral exclusion of God from one's life. In other words, while many people stop short of calling themselves atheists, they systematically reject the majority of dogmas held by Judaism and Christianity and other world religions. The bottom line is whether a culture is called atheistic isn't nearly as important as whether the culture believes in an atheistic way, according to Philip Faulkner. The fundamental atheist someone who believes as an atheist regardless of any religious belief. The person may have the combination of science and technology and makes for a fundamental atheistic culture for a culture in which religions have very little relevant. So long as people can work in a home to set aside rather than to act on their religious beliefs in any specific way, these people might as well be called atheists, even if they don't like the word. Atheist. These people are fundamentally atheists because they live in secular societies in which the crime behaviors aren't related and teachings in secular ways. And for the last century or so, we have lived in a predominantly secular setting. National atheistic society, or at the very least, one that is quickly moving in that direction. The government, the media, the academic world, the entertainment industry, the medical profession, and others have all set aside their religious beliefs in favor of secular values, and there are for all practical purposes of atheistic in our culture. The average Hollywood movie star, for instance, doesn't have a clue about the philosophy of the Nietzsche and whatever, but by living a Hindu lifestyle, by aggressively rejecting Judeo-Christian morality, and by adopting a purely secular Christian environment, and his celebrities are actually acting as fundamental functional atheists. And this is a critical important point to understand because at the same time, the culture has embraced a fundamentally atheist mentality. is also invasive. It's continuously being called a culture of death, and this is no more condoning its two cultures are in inextricably connected. The term culture of death first entered common usage at the Pope John Paul II mentioned several times in 1995 and February when he was mandatory into the household the because of John Paul wrote it also in six value of living which he said must be ultimately to the protection of natural life. And so the one of the light of the new life was fast growing and modern culture has come to consider him as merely to some other one. This was the issue of economic capacity of personal academics, and also the are good in particular further on that we were now in the midst of a new culture climate in which abortion, confusion, I don't know what it is, or it's not used in measures. Euthanasia and other anti-life practices such as cleaning service, capital punishment, and contraception and embryonic stem cell research on aborted babies are being justified as rights in the name of individual freedom. That is incredible watching. I don't know why I don't really at the same time maybe now like maybe watching this and kind of like it really maybe the landlord like the landlord and the people and be like this way because she could push us out and the people really suspicious like what? I'm not even bothering the video. I'm in my own home. Like I do read books, read the Bible, go to church, like I mind my business. I'm not bothering you, so you shouldn't be worried about me. That's how maybe people are. But the reason why I do so quick and share them with others and to gain knowledge and to do through them and to knowledge teach and to gain wisdom and to learn more different people to put in there and really working of wealth and other wisdom and also social media. So yeah. Social switching our economic capacity, our personal commitment, relations, capital punishment, competition, and indirect self versus unaborted babies are being justified as rights in the name of individual freedom. Indeed, the Pope said, I was like, by the way, I'm not into capitalism. I'm not into capitalism. Indeed, the Pope said, that our culture has become deeply constructed to death. He said that these crimes against life are in the European sense a war of the powerful against the weak, a life which would require labor, acceptance, love, and care is now considered useless, are held to be intolerable burden, and their rest is therefore rejected in this dire situation. He will also make us all fully aware that we are facing an enormous and dramatic clash between good and evil, death and life, and the culture of death and the culture of life. As recently the Pope was saying, that death has become the cure of all solutions to the problems of the world. Instead of employing love and prayer and sacrifice to deal with difficulties which can be painful for us to do, we now simply choose to kill our problems daily. The Catholic Church declared John Paul II in I don't believe in quotes and stuff like that. Crazy. It's also for many people in today's secular society disagree. Famously, the Pope has a very religious dynamic. Some even call him a martyr. He calls Christopher. He said the same of the other group in other countries. Not a true quote, but what is the truth? What does the Pope correct and definite with the culture or not? The court looked at some statistics given at the answer. We saw in chapter 3 that the atheist leaders bear the blame for the vast majority of crimes caused by war and mass murder in history. Indeed, between the years 1917 and 2007, approximately 138 million people were killed by atheistic political reasons. And overall number of murderers has increased dramatically as well. The United States Office on Drugs and Crime regularly conducts a global study on homicide, and for the last several years, the average number of potential homicides in the world has been approximately 50,000 per year. The number of suicides is even more shocking. According to the World Health Organization, more than 800,000 people killed in separate islands. The website suicide.org puts the number even higher, at more than a million, with one person taking his life, take their own life every 40 seconds. Now the New York Times, as well as the American Society for Suicide Prevention, reports that suicide rate in the United States surged to its highest levels in 2 decades, nearly 45,000 people. Dying from self-inflicted causes each year. According to the USA Today, there is a suicide in the country every 13 minutes. And regarding abortion, statistics are truly heartbreaking. Since the 1960s, there has been more than 1 billion abortions worldwide, and as of roughly 8.317, the total population of the planet. And the most recent and conservative study shows the annual worldwide number of abortions to be 112.4 million. However, the Gut Nature Institute, which was originally founded by the Planned Parenthood, and is now an independent research and policy organization committed to advancing sexual and reproductive health and rights in the United States and globally. In the May 2015 report, estimated the number of global abortions to be in outbound 56.3 million per year. In America alone, since the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision in 1973, more than 60 million abortions have taken place, and this is roughly equivalent to 1/3 of those prior generations. The state of the United States is abortion legal rights. The abortion death toll in the United States is now approximately 1 million per year, and New York City has the highest abortion rate in the country. According to a recent Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the CDC abortion surveillance report, New York City reported to 69,840 abortions and 116,777 registered births, which means that city's abortion rate is 60% of its birth rate. It is estimated that 92% of all women in the world who receive experimental guidance of Down syndrome abort their babies. In many countries, laws allow mothers to terminate their unborn children simply because they are the wrong gender, and that is not the gender they prefer. In some countries, abortion is compulsory for couples who already have the state allowed number of offspring. In China, for instance, the number has been one for many years, but has increased to two in late 2015. Horror stories about a woman who had their baby forcibly aborted at 7, 8, and even 9 months of pregnancy because they had violated the law. No matter your portion on the abortion issue, it is an undeniable fact that in the last 50 years, the same-time society has become so secularized and atheistic. There has been a historical, undefeated number of permitted pregnancies. Indeed, the atheist abortion connection has been established in other ways as well, according to a result poll of poor Americans with no religious attachment, self-proclaimed atheists, agnostics, and those with simply no religious preference identify themselves as pro-faith rather than pro-life by a 68% to 19% margin. 49% point to with the present the strongest propensity towards the cold faith, pushing at any need in the U.S. Demographics too. At the other end of the life spectrum, during the same fundamental atheist era, we have also seen corresponding wide differences in legalization of assisted suicide in the voluntary euthanasia. For example, the use of assisted suicide for prematurity in the life of an adult with a terminal illness is now routine across the globe. Anesthesia is a spooky being used on those who are mentally ill. Anesthesia, I don't know what word nature was legalized in the Netherlands in 2002. Use has risen 73%, with some 25,000 people killed. Mobile euthanasia. Teens now routinely kill approximately 1,000 people per year in the head. In Belgium, in the media, people could choose to die if they had a terminal illness. Depression are just a feeling that their lives are incomplete. In one case in Holland, a 41-year-old man was euthanized with the assistance of his physician because he couldn't stop drinking. The euthanizer is a frequently been used on children who are terminally ill. It is illegal for physicians to euthanize children at the age of 12 in the Netherlands and minors of all age in Belgium. Usually, a family in the Netherlands was cleared of any wrongdoing for holding down an elderly woman who struggled desperately against the doctor's efforts to euthanize her. A kindly Queen was wandering around her nursing home at night when exhibiting signs of dementia. In the United States, the right to die movement has grown increasingly more powerful. It currently permits euthanasia, and many other states are considered it as well. The favored method of mercy killing is the voluntary removal of substance from species that causes drawn out court-ordered death by starvation and dehydration of pericardial being encouraged stories about people whose own physicians recommended against assisted suicide, only to have other doctors who know little of the patient's history write fatal prescriptions for them, and at least one case involving woman insurance when I paid for her to continue her fight against lung cancer, but helpfully noted that it would pay for assisted suicide. Another man in Oregon was denied a life-threatening drug, but was notified that the state health plan would pay to kill him. Again, no matter where you stand on the issue of exclusion, there can be no question that these are searching and dangerous times for anyone who is hospitalized or seriously sick. The prominent issues are undoubtedly local and palliative about this commitment to an across the board pro-death agenda. When, for example, a woman on Twitter asked leading atheist Richard Dawkins what she should do in the event she became pregnant with a Down-syndrome baby, Dawkins immediately responded, "Abort it and try again. It would be immoral to bring it into the world if you have the choice." He later elaborated that it was wrong to have the baby from the point of view of the child's own welfare. Dawkins' reasoning was that the life of someone with Down syndrome would be too difficult to be worth the effort of the parents. It would be much more humane to kill it. In other words, in Dawkins' view, it is an ethical and prejudice to abort a mentally handicapped baby, and both for the sake of the world and for the child's own individual sake. Many parents of children with Down syndrome were understandably upset when they heard Dawkins' advice. From one father sent a heartfelt public letter to the atheist with dread. "Perhaps you believe that your position on abortion and Down syndrome is logically valid, but I wonder if you are kept awake at night by the revulsion that comes with being the champion of killing. Suffering is not a moral evil to be avoided. Suffering can have meaning and value. As Victor Sprint or Mohandas Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr., or if you're willing to ask me to." I have 2 children with Down syndrome, and they as up to their birth heard they chose to abortion and didn't. Instead, the children came to live with us, and they're delightful children. They're beautiful, they're happy. One is a cancer survivor, twice over. I found that in the hospital, she underwent chemotherapy and we suffered through ignorant exploitation. Our therapy was more focused on befriending nurses and still in stethoscope, and they suffered my children, but in the process of irrepressible joy. Why is there such a difference in thinking here? Why do atheists like Dawkins believe that this man's children and all other children like them should have been aborted rather than allowed to live, even when the parents are willing to love and care for them? How can we make sense of the atheist preference for death over love, acceptance, and sacrifice? In order to understand their rationale, we need to dig deeper into the philosophy of atheism. There are 3 strands of atheistic thought that keep popping up in these teachings. All of them can help to illuminate the atheist approach to subjects like homicidal suicide, infanticide, abortion, euthanasia, and let's take them one by one. First, atheists say that if there is no God, there can be no such thing as objective and eternal values. Everything is transient, and yes, there can be practical differences, but nothing truly universal or translated, and therefore the only sensible goal for human beings to strive after our worldly pleasure, conveniences, and the elimination of all suffering. If someone or something happens to stand in the way of the attainment of those objectives, it is perfectly acceptable and even praiseworthy to do whatever is necessary to eliminate that threat. Second, since there is no God for the atheist, no objective and eternal moral law can exist. Without objective moral law, human beings are free to become beings in initially phrase Superman, unfettered by silly commandments, and that comes from breaking them. Humans are at liberty to make their own laws, that is, whatever laws happen to suit them at at the time, and they themselves can define what constitutes a valuable life, or even life itself, deciding to pursuing the mercy according to their own standards as people. For Nietzsche and his atheist followers, the most important value in the world is power, and therefore life is always subordinate to choice, and the choice made by the strong to dominate the weak, who usually stand in the way of pleasure and convenience is always the correct course of action. Third, atheists believe that since there is no God, it is nonsense to believe that human beings are made in the image and likeness of God. Indeed, humans are not special at all, rather they are expendable animals, ethically mostly with bigger brains, they possess neither God-given moral, moral souls, nor any kind of inherent or infinite dignity. Is simply the present one biological animal among many biological animals, and therefore particular is not particularly important. Humans can be oppressed by cruel governments, murdered, aborted, and euthanized at any age and for any reason, as long as it serves some greater practical good. Whether, of course, it is obvious determined by human Americans to be strongest at the moment. We need to firmly regulate the ethical philosophy of atheism. The unethical understand that modern atheists see what's best to manipulate people about them because the vision of the world is simply they apply nothing short of terrifying. Remember what we said in the last chapter about this new breed of atheists. Unlike the predecessors, they constantly resort to lie. They have to do this because they are too cowardly to admit the logical implications of their thinking. They understand that the language used by they must try to with the opponents to those people, and they understand that these three things that Paul described about human person when it's applied to daily. So instead of boldly proclaiming them, we chose to ignore or deny them, or even worse, like Dawkins, hide behind the falsehood that we are one being, attaching to those who are sufferers. And yet once we look past the lies and try to really grasp the fundamental principles of atheism taught, the whole posture of this makes perfect sense. It makes sense, for instance, that the Supreme Court of the United States should take it upon themselves to redefine what a human person is and legalize abortion, a practice that has been considered barbarism by all human nations for thousands of years. And none of the logical implication of atheist thinking, which is we can choose to do anything we like, including decide what human life is, and destroy the weakest and most vulnerable among us. It makes sense that institutions like Planned Parenthood will become involved in scandals involving the harvesting and selling of fetal organs and others before the baby parts. That is the logical implication of atheist thinking, which says that because human beings have no transcendent dignity, we can utilize or discard their bodies in any way that might be profitable to us. It makes sense that in the 21st century, our society will do everything possible to encourage drunkenness, diet, and lascivity, while at the same time promote enthusiasm and abortion for any or no medical reason at all. A healthy and long life is the atheist hope definition of a worthwhile life. In the end, pleasure is their only measure. So naturally, one faces a person whose life does not conform to the definition. For example, a baby with Down syndrome, an old man with dementia, a young woman with depression. The society is likely put to avoid euthanize or assist with suicide. And that is the logical implication of atheist thinking, which says that only thing that counts is the physical and material quality of life. Any talk about the people's spiritual meaning of suffering, endurance, sacrifice, and joy is just religious nonsense. You see, once we understand the atheist philosophy of life, it becomes immediately clear why they have such a love affair with death. It also becomes clear that they are generous toward the future. And now this is where things get really scary because when it comes to using death as a cure, all for human problems, atheists have only just scratched the surface. You're still in following. Many writers and environmentalists today believe that human activity reduces the gravity threat to the planet, and increasing number of them are now saying that the most effective solution towards ecological problems would be to dramatically reduce that threat through abortion and euthanization. For example, in 2017, Michael Byrne, the executive director of the Sears Club Sierra Club, stated that abortion is an ethnic tool in protecting the environment from the threat of overpopulation. And then I Kingdom Lord Shin Flynn, who is disabled, recently gave a stirring speech in the House of Lords in which he talked about the disturbing trends in abortion law on the grounds of disability. He said that rightness is on the wall for people like me, people with congenital disabilities are facing extinction, and if we were animals, perhaps we would need firefighter protection as an endangered species. But we are only human beings with disabilities, so we do not. Currently, there is a strong push by euthanasia advocates to stop spoon feeding all primary patients if they requested that in the not too distant, the well-known atheist and professor of bioaesthetics at Princeton University believes that doctors should be permitted to discontinue inject Alzheimer's patients, even if they never asked to kill, because they qualify as a non-person. These are some of the latest theorems in our culture of death. They represent the first piece of what is to come. And after all, if human beings are no more than disposable commodities, abortions, even if the ethanol another method of killing can be justified for any reason at all, including helping to advocate overpopulation, immigration, poverty, homelessness, child abuse, and problems including race relations. In fact, if you really want to know the agenda of the new atheists, you only have to look back to the older and bolder atheists of the past who weren't afraid to speak their minds about what they believe. Margaret Singer, for instance, the founder of Planned Parenthood, was listed proudly as a conservative atheist and activist on the website TheCelebAtheist.com, said in her book Woman in the New Race, the most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. She also laid out the problem of deficit in an article called American Music Tools for Babies. Here's a tiny sampling. Article 1. The purpose of the American Baby Code shall be to provide for a better distribution of babies and to protect society against the propagation and increase of the unfit. Article 4. No woman shall have the legal right to bear a child, and no man shall have the right to become a father without a permit. Article 6. No permit for parenthood should be valid for more than one birth. The singer, whose marketing slogan was "No Gods, No Masters," was an early proponent of eugenics, the science of a proven human population that controls breeding for the purpose of increasing the appearance of societal characteristics and decreasing negative traits in people. Recall this was one of the Nazi's favorite bills of study. Singer still very much celebrated today as a terror by Planned Parenthood. Was not timid about entertainment her belief that human reproduction has to be forcibly controlled and manipulated in order to realize any undesirable. In her book entitled Observation, she wrote, that handicapped people feeding the blood that's new contained in the project against three presidents to the dead weight of human waste, and have really took aside the stern and the rigid policy of sterilization and circulation to that great a population whose programming exceeded or whose inherent that unfixable traits may be transmitted to offspring. The whole diabetic population, people with bad genes, will have this case of sterilization, compulsory sterilization. The singer also considered blacks to be an inferior race, and that had to be sterilized, controlled, and aborted out of the retreat, she stated. If we train the Negro doctor at the clinic, he can go among us with enthusiasm, with knowledge, which I believe will have far-reaching results among the colored people. The minister's tip for is also important, and also he should be trained perhaps by the Federation as to our ideas and the goal that we hope to reach. We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of the more rebellious members. And this is with partiality to and quote, given the fact that today Planned Parenthood is extraordinarily active in African American communities. A study of recent study about the group protecting Black lives found that 79% Parenthood parentless physical board of citizens are looking with walking victims of the African American neighborhoods. In fact, African American babies in New York City have a better chance of dying in the womb than of being born, according to a report from the New York City Department of Mental Hygiene. On average, for every 1,000 Black babies born in New York City, every year 1,200 are aborted. In Mississippi, 72% of the total number of abortions are performed on Black babies. And this in a state where whites outnumber Blacks by a radical of 16 to 1. Margaret Sanger was at the house and doubtfully details to know that her atheist vision of a unitary and Jewish society that less than true. And then there is an inscriber side. We can't end this discussion without talking briefly about the killing of babies that have already been born. In the Netherlands, the gruesome practice is already legal. Indeed, it is typically acceptable that from doctors to parents, people may decide that desperately ill newborns can be killed shortly after birth. Likewise, traditional abortion at this time is usually as normally cause for disabled children is now being considered in Canada. In Utah, the well-known Canadian bioethicist has stated once they have clear that death report is in the best interest of the infant, able and reasonable not to think about discuss as painfully and as much control as parents of finding by the parents as is thus feasible. And why should they think it unreasonable to bring about the death of newborns if we really define persons as only those beings who are capable of rational thought and self-reflection, and not only are fetuses and embryos, not persons, but neither are atheists. Atheist Professor John Harris, perhaps the most highly respected member of the British Medical Association Ethics Committee, wholeheartedly agrees. On numerous occasions, he has stated whether infanticide is justifiable because it is simply not possible to think that there is any moral change that occurs during the journey down the tunnel. In other words, there is no moral difference between the fetus and born baby. Atheist versus Aperture, Sabini, Francesca, Manura, added to the chorus of umbilical cord for the regulation of the baby killing. In the papers after birth abortion, why should the baby live? They make the following argument. Number one, both the fetus and newborns do not have the same moral status as actual persons. Two, the fact that both are potential persons in morality irrelevant. Or three, adoption is not always in the best interest of actual people. Therefore, they conclude after birth abortion killing a newborn should be punishable in all the cases where abortion is excluded in cases where the newborn is not disabled. All cases including where the newborn is not disabled are using these words carefully. They are not made up. They are not the product of religious paranoia. They come from the mouths of some of today's leading atheists, and this is where our culture is born. This is where the new atheists are taking us. For a world where ending life is the answer to every problem, a world where killing is always preferable to love and sacrifice, a world where each other's abortions fetal everything. In Asia, official suicide for suicide and genocide are effective all the time for all reasons. This is future. We have to look up and face that if the Bible says that God's primary motive is to bring forth life, then the dark twisted and morbid motto of the modern atheist theory is just the opposite. And we have come that you may have death. We have come that you may have death, and have it more easily. And as we shall see in the next chapter, not only are the atheist ideas about making a coercion a reality, but they all have the faith in religious purely necessary to accomplish it. So, I'm almost done with this. Chapter 8, the faithfulness of the atheist. So believers have always claimed that atheism not only takes place, but it is a case. Atheists of course scoff at this notion, just like they scoff at everything they say. And when it comes to rational argument, atheists will ridicule, mock, sneer, and scorn, and deride and hide. They'll do anything except argue rationality. And that is a pity, because the association that atheists aspire to is a fascinating and paradox of the basic discussion. When believers make their claim, they mean it. They're not being facetious in any way. They know what they're talking about because it's their business to know about faith. They know the difference between belief and knowledge. Atheists do not. Of course, they say they do. In fact, atheists make the ridiculous claim that they have no belief whatsoever regarding God. They say that they merely lack faith in Him. In other words, they define atheism not as something positive, but rather something negative, as the absence of belief and absence that is due to a lack of evidence. And isn't that so convenient? If atheism is merely the absence of belief, then atheists would never have to defend the quotient. After all, if the quotient is really non-quotient, there is no confinement, electrical obligation to apply to any position of it. And notice that atheists love most a phony straw man, non-distinction. It makes perfect sense if you're ignorant, shallow, and cowardly to begin with. The last thing you want to do is to defend your thinking on rational grounds. Better to avoid electrical debate altogether, because people to know that talking and sneering and scoffing, but they're not going to get away with that here. If this book has shown anything at all, it's that atheism is the furthest thing in the world from an absence of belief. Indeed, atheism is a whole system of belief, a system that has its own philosophy, materialism, morality, and religion, politics, social order, and culture, technology. It even has its own surveillance, devotion, and genocide, and information. And this system of belief has been responsible for more deaths, carnage, persecution, and injury than any system of belief the world has ever known. So no atheist can get off the scot-free by calling what they so clearly believe mere unbelief. They can't hold out their hands and mock innocence. The ancient concept that they have nothing to prove when those same hands are given with so much blood. We are going to be held to the same electrical standard that they claim applies to people of faith. But before we get to the specifics of what atheists believe, let's first talk about the law of faith itself. What exactly is the mysterious thing, and why do atheists treat it as much as a dirty word? Ultimately, faith is trust and confidence in something that has a strong basis in reason, but which can't be absolutely entirely given. Faith is completely integral to superstition and science, which have no rational basis whatsoever, unless you can compare it to the belief in Santa Claus or the secret or the flying spaghetti monster, as so many atheists places become true. Faith is obviously the reason. And compared to what atheists say, all human beings have faith at some time. It's impossible to live in the world without it. For instance, every morning millions of people get up and drive to work, and during their commute, nothing separates them from oncoming traffic except a thin white line. They pass all kinds of cars and trucks and trailers that are going 160 miles an hour and headed right toward them. They don't know the drivers of their vehicles. They have no clue about their driving records or whether or not any of them has a drinking problem. Because one of those other drivers, the road is 2 feet, is actually a curb. Yet these companies go very loud without blinking as hunters as they go to live past them. And how can they do that? They have faith that those other drivers will stick to the other side of the road. And when he's posted to work, it is the same story. He sits down at the desk, and above them is a big cylinder, and they haven't ever checked it. They haven't checked to see if the support signals are now in property or if the wood has been eaten away by termites. They haven't checked to verify that all the building permits are in order, and for all they know, the whole structure might go into depression, and yet day after day they sit in front of the computer screens without a care in the world. Why? Because they have faith that people who go through the faculty are professionals who did everything they were supposed to do to make sure that working environment is safe, and almost all our knowledge of history is based on faith too. Think about it. For year round when Romans conquered in 1036 BC, or when Columbus discovered America in 1492, or when George Washington crossed the Delaware River in 1776. If we really actually see those events, how can we be so sure they ever did? Oh, but there's evidence, you say. There's our documents and books and testimonies of people. Yes, that's right. And that's the same kind of evidence on which people outbase the history of their religious beliefs, whether you're talking about religion or the historical record of mankind. Those of the information we have has been passed down to us from generation to generation, and very little of it is firsthand, and very little of it is scientifically provable. Most of it must be accepted or based in the author's document based in their reliability of Bible and based on their ability to draw logical and rational conclusions from a whole range of data and evidence. The point is faith is not some mechanical fundamentals, such a religious concept. It's a basic necessity for living in the world, and whether or not atheists admit it, they're just as dependent on it as everyone else. What are some of the things that atheists take on faith? He takes first and the said when a man stops believing in God, he doesn't then believe in nothing, he believes anything. How true that is. There aren't enough pages in this book to describe all the preconceived that atheists hold dear to God. So let's start with the most obvious. the assertion that God doesn't exist because there is no evidence for his existence. And this, of course, currently appears in chapter 1 of this book. We discuss some of the great thinkers in history who were also student leaders, and those men and women have faced in supreme not only because of their acceptance of the Bible as the Word of God, but also because of the topological and analytical reasoning. Indeed, there are dozens of rational arguments that demonstrate the existence of God, far too many to go over here, and there are still the cosmological argument, for instance, which is force suppression. Where did everything come from? There is the theological argument, which points to the order and harmony of the universe and asserts that there must be some kind of design. There are arguments that stem from the notions of the carnal agency and desire for disease, abstraction, the miracles for morality and conscience, and form reliable personalities. The list goes on and on. However, there be no logic and observation of the physical world and our own consciousness are to inductive and deductive reasoning. None of them are based on scripture. None of them attempt to prove God's existence merely by asserting that the Bible says to say it. The truth is, once atheists say there is no evidence for God, what they really mean is that there is no scientific evidence for his existence. And that is an altogether different thing. For atheists to even make that claim demonstrates their belief in the power of science as both exaggerated and irrational. Indeed, the declaration that something must be scientifically explainable or provable in order to be believed is in the class of no proof. And this proof, as we noted in chapter 5, is an electrical fallacy known as Scientism believes that the reduction of all legitimate knowledge to the scientific form of knowledge, and its fundamental problem approach is that it can be proven scientifically, and there is simply no way to entirely assert or extensively verify the notion that this can only be realized as to scientific means. The whole proportion is therefore unscientific. It is an atheist view based on solely on the faith in its truth, not on any scientific evidence. Indeed, the whole study of science would be impossible unless we made another leap on the scientific conception. We must first assume that the universe is intelligible, that is understandable, that is predictable to some degree, that there is reason law, the reason that it makes sense, and particularly that we need to physical laws. Otherwise, the person is continually without observing intelligibility and no scientific interpretation could. You will never be able to trust the outcome of any of the experiments you conduct. You would also never be able to trust your own thought process or reasoning ability. And yet the whole concept of intelligibility has not in fact been scientifically proven. As its core is the faith-based assumption of based on what appears to be true. Now again, there's nothing wrong with this, like the other kinds of faith we talked about. It's a necessary part of life, but atheists don't have the courage, honesty, or intelligence to admit it. Instead, they robotically rattle off the same self-delusion of the Bible. If it can't be scientifically proven, it's not true, and that's only the beginning of the faith. Remember, atheists believe that everything in life passes purely and purely through, and they completely deny the existence of the spiritual. They believe that others, our thoughts, dreams, passions, lust, hate, hope, ambitions, virtues, sins, and sufferings are driven solely by atomic activity. We believe that all our philosophies, politics, cultures, art, literature, music, history, and deepest desire for eternal life and all that is transcendent in the world. The good, the true, and the beautiful is purely the result of biochemical reactions, nirvana movement of the molecules in empty and lifeless ether. And this is not science, it's based for more 16 of us nephews that says at the foundation for all superstition, if there's even more atheistic and false beliefs of options that can't be proven scientifically. For instance, we believe that the incredible complex universe of our universe of unparalleled breathing harmony and order came about all by itself, out of nothing. We believe that organizations came out of chaos, that life came out of life systems, that consciousness came out of the unconscious, that reason came out of irrationality, and none of these things can be shown. As far as none can be demonstrated or restricted scientifically, and none of them even make sense. Of course, some atheists and philosophers may be named. For example, after knowing that the universe is begin with, and some very silly atheists think that evolution somehow explains how life first began. But these views are utterly unbelievable. Claim that the universe is chaotic and disorganized lies in the face of common sense. For instance, we all know the moon orbits around the Earth in a ecliptic spiral, and the Earth circles the sun in a ecliptic spiral, and the sun circles the galaxies, centered in a ecliptic spiral, and billions of stars and billions of galaxies all move in similar predictable spiral paths in which the trajectory, and 90% of the observable matter in the universe acts in the highly organized ways to deny that the universe is organized as two questions. Even a high school student with the telescope can see that. And as to the claim that evolution explains the origin of life, we touched on this nonsensical notion before. The statistical odds are even the most elemental kind of life could arise as a result of a random mixing of molecules in some terminal heat are so astronomical that even scientists have trouble figuring them out. We can't say that the odds are trillion to one because that figure is much too low. Dr. Stephen TMI, director of the Center for Science and Culture of the Discovery Institute, argues that the probability of generating and even a short functional protein which is essentially a building block of life is 1 in 10, a number so insensible as to defy the description of human development and Speed is similar logically if you took thousands of letters of the alphabet and threw them high up into the air and watched them all fall to the ground, and they somehow form themselves into four-fluid warranties that would be as likely to occur as life being formed by the transmission of molecules. And that's why Dr. Mara and his colleagues have seen that there is a much greater probability of different some kind of cosmic design, given the nature of the creation of life on the planet, and the theory of the concept of fundamental society frequency. In the beginning, as far as the past action of the publishing and reading this subject and interest, we could not be considered correct, but despite the testimony of the society and mathematics, atheists absolutely thesis even the possibility that the universe had a design. Without the factory between the dogma that life on this planet has to talk about that chance. And pushing to logic contradicts the science and even contradicts the science itself. But they still believe it. They still believe it in that truth. Let's put another way, atheists scoff at Christians for believing that Christ could raise people from the dead because according to their way of thinking, miracles aren't scientifically possible. The Christians accept the mission that Christ could raise people from the dead only because they also believe that Christ is God and God is supernatural, creator of life, and that faith requires faith, but at least it has a logical basis. The atheists, on the other hand, believe that life came from non-life, consciousness came from non-consciousness, and thought came from non-thought, and live on much more stupendous miracles in any the gospel report, but atheists won't perceive they are miracles. Their faith is so restricted that it doesn't allow for the slightest derivation from the doctrine of materialism. The famous Christian writer and ex-atheist C.S. Lewis once said, if you are an atheist, you do have to believe that the main point in all the religions of the whole world is simply one huge mistake. And if you are a Christian, you are free to think that all of religions, even the queerest ones, contain at least some hint of truth. When I was an atheist, I had to try to persuade myself that most of the human race have always been wrong about the questions that matter to them most. And when I became a Christian, I was able to take a more liberal view. A more liberal view is something that is not open to atheists who insist solely on the basis of faith that science will one day be able to explain all the mysteries and miracles of the universe. But science can't even figure out how to make a blade of grass. In fact, science can't even answer the most basic scientific questions. What is dark matter, for example, or what is dark energy? What can't be seen or felt, but somehow take up 70% of the universe? Or how can light be made of both particles and waves at the same time? Or why does time only go on in one direction? Or why can we only imagine three dimensions when so many more are suggested by string theory and other scientific theories? Or how can quantum mechanics and gravity live together? Or how can either one of them exist when black holes contradict both? These are legitimate scientific mysteries, and scientists don't have a clue as to their answers. Yet atheists continue to worship at the feet of science as if it is some kind of deity, propagating the mad illusion that it holds the key to unlocking of all secrets of meaning. The truth is, when it comes to the deepest mysteries of life, science will never have the answer. And the reason we can be so sure is that the question having to do with the origin of the cosmos are still lost to the nature, not just scientific. Everywhere in this book, he quoted Albert Einstein, who said the most beautiful emotion we can express is the mystical. The deeper we go into science, the more mysterious and mystery things become. In its center lies the greatest mystery of all, the mystery of existence. Why is there something rather than nothing? That is the question that questions the riddle of riddles. We're in Vineyard, and the atheists are completely in the dark about it. The pause here and really consider this point. It's crucial that we try to understand it because it explains why atheists actually need pardon our faith and believers. Logic and common sense dictates that something can't come from nothing. That much should be obvious to anyone, and therefore the substance that makes up the cosmos matter couldn't have popped into existence spontaneously in itself, and there had to have been some original cause to it. And that's why the Big Bang theory is remembered. Was usually formulated by Socrates after he suffered the arguments of logic existence for it. If the cosmos really didn't come about as a result of a massive explosion, then what kind of substance or force existed right before the explosion? What precipitated the explosion in the first place? And only the most ignorant of atheists would believe that nothing existed before the Big Bang. If they truly saw such a thing, they would be admitting that some kind of light violated life, because again, something can't come from nothing. And thus any atheist is of participant must recognize that the Big Bang theory only provides possible explanation for how a person universe came about. In my hypothesis, it does not give us any indication of the origin of the cosmos. Maybe your phone. To try to deceive myself that most of the human race have always been wrong about the question that magically done most when asking a question I age. Take one video. A most liberal view is something that is not open to atheists, and this is solely on the basis of faith that science will one day be able to explain all the mysteries and miracles of the universe. But science can't even figure out how to make a blade of grass. In fact, science can't even answer the most basic primitive question: what is dark matter and what is reality? These are legitimate scientific mysteries and scientists don't have a clue to the answers, yet atheists continue to worship as the field of science. explanation and is supposed to be a relatively for typical union. The truth is, when it comes to the deepest mysteries of life, science will never have the answers. The reason can be so sure if the questions having to do with the origin of the cosmos are direct to the nature, not chemistry, of forums that be totally out of our science. That was the question of questions, the riddles, ignominious, and atheists are completely in the dark about it. If all feel and really consider this point is crucial, that we try to understand it because it explains why atheists have to need more faith and believers are taking some common sense. We take to something, can't come from nothing, and that much should be obvious to anyone. Therefore, the substance that makes up the cosmos matter couldn't have tapped into existence spontaneously by itself. There had to have been some original falsehood, and that's why the Big Bang Theory, which remember was originally formulated by the faculty of physics argument for gravitation. Only the most ignorant ape of atheists would believe that nothing existed before the Big Bang if they truly thought that something they were committed in that some kind of godism. Alright, is that one? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Are you still there? That is it. Now, sometimes the time, possibly the gravity or some other force of nature caused everything to come into being. Other scientists have postulated the existence of a multitude which came in unconsiderably large number of universities. The find theory superior representing a theory for which there is no experiential or observational evidence, but none of the explanations suggest the origin, cause of those forces or events. Must be read. None of them address the central question of existence itself. Any possible cause, scientific theory about must necessarily have been contingent on some other cause, which was also contingent on something else, assumed that an accident with degrees of constant causes, gravity, for example, has to come from somewhere. Therefore, none of these causes can be purely original cause. The bottom line is everything comes back to some mysterious reality that is not contingent or dependent on anything else. And sometimes this reality's very nature is to be some reality can be combined to find its existence itself. And as atheists have the brain power to grasp the conscious understand that this nature non-sufficient reality has only one of two possible identities. Either it's God, is natural, spiritual, or the cosmos, whose nature is material. In other words, either God or the cosmos can always exist, and there is no other choice. And what does this mean for atheists? It means that they have a big problem in their hands. It means they have faith. It means that according to their own belief system, the cosmos has no beginning, and matter itself has no beginning. In other words, despite the fact that atheists don't believe in eternal God, they still have no comprehensive or fundamental mystery of eternal matter. The mystery that science can never hope to fathom. And after all, how in the world can matter have no beginning? How can anything have no beginning? This is something even the greatest scientific beings can't wrap their minds around. It's not something that can be dismissed naturally or many probably atheists today. Those who believe in God have the same mystery to comprehend what, but at least they have a rational foundation to grab a hold. They assert that it's possible for God to create the cosmos to have no beginning, or only because he is supernatural spiritual, because he exists on a whole different plane. And then the material universe, because it is his nature to be calculated in non-conscious. The cosmos on the other hand does not display the nature of something that is inherently necessary and undefined. The cosmos could consciously be much different from what is differently is. It clearly collectively operate under different physical laws and be made of different scientific knowledge and even different kinds of cultures. Therefore, the nature of the cosmos is not believed, but rather might be. In other words, the cosmos doesn't exist to bodies or consistent between today and ultimate reality that was in the beginning. God had a history Christian purity, according to believers, God is a necessary and physical spiritual being whose very nature is created. The particle family of the Bible here and God body related to the earth life who said initially, I am who I am. This basically translates into what I am the existence itself. In other words, when God was asked the physics of all philosophy questions to respond perfectly morally the party decides to die by creation. Then the other great mysteries we see in the cosmos spirit is the intelligence of God brings the order and intelligence design of the universe. The life of God is being consciousness and Christ as theological teachings of the universe. The spiritual nature of God seems to translating the spiritual body to the breath in the universe. In the word, God is the key that is all the law. Now, of course, none of the side actually proves that God exists, but as a philosopher, morally or literally have reasonable grounds for affirming God's existence and resources with reasonable grounds and transit as a rational basis to take the next step. In the spiritual domain, we conclude investigate the truth of revelation, the power of prayer, the work of the writings of the great theologians, and the life and work of Christ, all with their objective and open mind. Atheists do not have such God at the start of their belief system, which is functional and self-explanatory, about which they must have a blind and basic faith, a faith that says that cosmos is limited for no reason at all, and against all reasons. In the end, atheists actually require more faith than believers because their faith involves them as not a significant existential logic and common sense. It is this greater faith a probably response to this aggressive behavior of modern atheists. Faith of a God is an incredible source of power, explains why atheists are so near and fundamentally individual. The rewarded explains that the first teaching isn't individual, but because offering public freedom of expression. The fact that atheists today try to keep time to defend in rupture portion, there is something exciting religion of their own, and know they exist. When believers apply the word evangelical to them, that understands them perfectly in evangelical atheist is one who not only believes there is no supreme being, but also is obsessed with creating the whole world of the strong. And even if they have not been coming to taking from you see on this page throughout this book, haven't you spoken at length about the obnoxious Paul says to the atheists like Richard Dawkins, the most ordinary is every bit as required and personal as anything in this creature. And he was similarly mixed by many statements such as faith is one of the world's great evils comparable to the smallpox virus, but hardest to actually take. Fabricating gods in the face of the earth is closely what the new atheists have in mind, and the school has led leading to assert that atheists are not necessarily evil or subconscious, rather paradoxical religious creed with two main doctrines. One, there is no God, and two, I hate them. For such put well and using only for to trivialize the security of the atheist faith. Indeed, there is victory, the victory, Vigotry, has become so pitiful that even a few fair-minded atheists have taken notice and raised it up their pain. This sadness for instance citing me, I never heard quoted fellow atheists as a silent and at last. There is something particularly realistic about what has been termed of the atheist movement, and there is no admiration for this fascinating popularity. By the light position, Christian doctrines and general Hamlet and Christopher Hitchens as their new Christ, particularly their form of parliamentary. The atheist parliamentary, the curls with the atheist parliamentary, while others in parliament. The conviction that they are so possessions of truth, scientific or otherwise, the troubling lack of tolerance for the views of which critics often have compared creationists to Holocaust deniers, resistance only literary reading of scripture, murderers in fact, than one finds among most religious fundamentalists. The simplest reductionism of the religious fundamental, and perhaps most bizarre reader of the ones that the belief that we have been oppressed and marginalized by the Western society that just not trying to take it anymore. And that really say law, atheists today are simply rooted no intolerant of dominant, even relativistic, irrational, and abuse. In short, they resisted all the characteristics that had always been attributed to the evil side of religion. In their account of one tremendous difference between the evangelical faith of the believer and that of the modern atheist, and those who believe in God want to spread the good news that God is not just a non-contingent, self-existing reality, but also a sentient being who entered history and became one of us in the form of a humble carpenter from Nazareth, and they want to spread the good news that this God loves us and cares about us at the spite of all the suffering in the world. Death does not have the final word, but rather the end of human history regards to true love. If all that is true, then it is indeed a good news that should be disseminated far in life. The evangelical faith of the atheist, on the other hand, is quite the opposite. At the end of their belief system is death, and the death of absolutely everything. Would one think they would be content to keep their faith in the gloomy philosophy of futility to themselves, and they leave the rest of us alone? But they're not. Instead, they have taken their belief in nothingness and turned it into a twisted and inverted gospel, which they want to spread to the ends of the earth. What can it all mean? We're going to eat populist books and still not clear. What is the strange philosophy of envy? The thing that is so full of pride, ignorance, and false and ignorance. The thing that lies, hates, and kills so much. The thing that is in love with death and has more blind grief than all the religions. It despises. The thing that wants to possessively destroy its tendencies across the globe. Even more importantly, what is the ultimate mother in me? Is here at last we come to the moment of truth when all questions will be answered. In Southeast Imperium, there were 9 circles on now. Each worse than the last, each forced its own particular form of internal torture, and we now pass through all the major lanes that make his hellish beast become known as a judgment. We have finally arrived at a very simple point.